Hey there, and welcome. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on one of the biggest buzzwords out there, creativity. We're going to break it down from this kind of vague, abstract idea into a really practical framework that you can actually understand and use. So let's get started by tackling a huge myth about where creativity even comes from.
So here's the big question we always hear. Is creativity some kind of magic? A special gift that only a few lucky people are born with? It's a really common way to think about it. But, well, as we're about to see, the reality is actually way more structured and, honestly, a lot more accessible than you might think.
Okay, let's get straight to the point. If there is one thing you absolutely have to remember for your exam, it's this definition right here. See, in the world of organizations, creativity isn't just about having a wild, off-the-wall idea. It has two parts, and both are essential. The idea has to be new, sure, but it also has to be useful. Think about it. A totally original idea that doesn't solve a problem or add any value, it's just noise. So the magic formula is new plus useful.
So here's our game plan for this explainer. We just talked about the myth versus the reality. Next up, we're diving into what I call the 4 pillars of creativity. Then we'll zoom in on 2 of those, the creative person and the creative process. And we'll wrap it all up with the key takeaways that you'll definitely want to remember. All right, so creativity isn't just one single thing. It's much easier to get a handle on when you look at it through a framework of 4 different parts or pillars. This is super helpful because it shows us that if we want to spark more creativity, we've got to think about a lot more than just, coming up with ideas. So these are the 4 pillars that really hold everything up. First, you've got the creative person. That's the individual and their specific traits. Then there's the creative process, the actual steps they take. And this next one is so important, the creative environment. This is the context, the culture that can either supercharge new ideas or just shut them down completely. We're talking about a place with psychological safety where it's okay to fail because that's part of learning. And finally, you have the creative idea itself, the final product, which, like we said, has to be both new and useful. Let's start with that first pillar, the creative person. Now, what's really cool here is that we are not talking about some kind of magical, innate gift. As you'll see, these are really just traits and attitudes that, honestly, anyone can work on, and that good managers can help bring out in their teams. So what do these traits actually look like? Well, it all starts with a deep sense of curiosity and having the self-confidence to maybe go against the flow a little. But what's absolutely key is a high tolerance for uncertainty. Being okay with that messy, confusing phase before the answer is clear. That takes real energy and perseverance to push through. It also helps to have a sense of playfulness, to just explore without judgment. And all of it, of course, is built on a willingness to take a few smart risks. Okay, on to our second pillar. If the creative person is the who, then the creative process is the how. And this is so important because it proves that creativity isn't just about waiting for a lightning bolt of inspiration to strike. Nope. It's a structured journey with clear, manageable steps that can take you all the way from chaos to a concrete plan. And this lays out that journey perfectly. It all begins with formulating the right problem. Coming up with a brilliant solution to the wrong problem is pretty useless, right? Then you do your homework, you gather information. And only then, after all that prep work, do you start generating ideas. And notice how evaluation and selection come after you generate ideas. You have to keep creating separate from judging. It all ends with a solid plan to make that best idea actually happen. Now, to really nail that process, you've got to understand these 2 different modes of thinking. First, there's diverging. This is when you go wide. It's pure brainstorming. Get as many options on the table as you can, no judgment allowed. Quantity over quality. Then, you switch gears to converging. This is the total opposite. Now you put on your critical, analytical hat. You evaluate, you judge, and you narrow everything down to find the very best option. The secret to a great creative process is being good at both and knowing exactly when to switch from one to the other. All right, we have covered a ton of ground. So let's bring it all home with a final summary. Seriously, this is the slide you might want to screenshot or come back to when you're studying, because it boils everything down to the absolute essentials. Let's just quickly walk through this. First, creativity itself. What's the core concept? New plus useful. Don't forget that useful part. For the creative person, the big takeaway is that attitude and traits matter. Things like curiosity and courage are skills you can build. And for the creative process, remember it has those 6 phases. And the key rhythm is this.
First you diverge and create options, then you converge and make choices. So if you only remember one single thing from our time together, please let it be this. Creativity is not an accident, it is not magic, it is a competency. It's a skill that can be understood with frameworks like the 4 pillars, it can be managed with a clear process, and it can be actively encouraged in yourself, in your team, and across your whole organization. And that really brings us to the final question, which is for you. Now that you have the building blocks, you know about the person, the process, the environment, how are you going to start using them to spark some real creativity in your own work? Thanks so much for joining me.